but not so fearful that we stop what we're doing and really examine how it is that they've been waging.
And that we will in fact find weapons or evidence of weapons programs that are conclusive.
I don't think we'll discover anything myself.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north.
Well, first of all, I have it lied.
He said there were three main reasons for going to war in Iraq: weapons of mass destruction, the claim that Iraq was sponsoring terrorists who had attacked us on 9/11.
Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained,
and that Iraq had purchased nuclear materials from Niger. All three of those turned out to be false.
First, just if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein.
Who does the president think he's effing kidding?
Of course, it was information that was mistaken.
There are a lot of people who lie and get away with it.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
You got to figure out what to do with all of the debris.
How about you? You made money off the Gulf War! And now you're going to vote for your fascist son!
He says that going after Saddam Hussein was topic A 10 days after the inauguration, 8 months before September 11th.
There are memos. One of them, marked secret, says, plan for post-Saddam Iraq.
Discussed an occupation of Iraq
in January and February of 2001.
And approached this house. Here, according to specialist James Barker's statement, he and another soldier took it in turns to rape the 14-year-old girl. In another room, the girl's parents and 5-year-old sister were shot dead.
That is murdering young men and women from this country and others. That George Tenet and Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and George Bush et al. Should be in fucking jail.
Human rights across the world. And so what will guide us is what has always guided us, which is a belief in the rule of law, the belief of human rights, and a belief that a safe world is a world where there are rules which are as binding on the strong as they are on the weak. There are 24 million or so voters in this country. They're the kingmakers. You know, it's not for me, it's not for Nick Clegg or David Cameron or Gordon Brown to decide how this country is governed.
2/3 of Americans say it's not worth fighting.
So?
So you don't care what the American people think?
No, I think you cannot be blown off course.
All lies! More lies! Still lies! Stop the lies! Stop the lies!
We were told that we invaded Iraq to bring the nation freedom, but Pentagon documents show their real plan was to balkanize the nation into 3 or 4 sections and foment endless sectarian civil war. The true objective was to ensure the nation remained in turmoil as a pretext to build permanent military bases, as well as delivering long-term profits to defense contractors. Think about it. Do defense contractors make more money if they were just in Iraq a year? Or now the projected decade? United States, British, and Israeli forces have all been caught repeatedly carrying out staged terror attacks in Iraq in an attempt to keep the war going. In the interest of time, we'll look at just one example. In late September of 2005, in the British-controlled city of Basra, 2 British Special Forces SAS commandos attacked a group of police at a checkpoint, killing one and injuring another. When they were finally subdued and brought into custody, their car was filled with plastic explosives, automatic weapons, rocket-propelled grenades, and other bomb-making materials. Why would members of Britain's most elite fighting force, the Special Air Services, be dressed up like Arabs out shooting police with a car full of plastic explosives in a city that had been racked by sectarian violence? The governor of Basra in Iraq ordered that the British soldiers be held for trial for the murder they'd committed. Within hours of their incarceration, dozens of British tanks and hundreds of soldiers assaulted the main police station in Basra, killing jail guards and police in the process to free the two commandos. Over 150 prisoners escaped, and the controlled mainstream media reported on the incident as if it was no big deal.
We cannot wait for the final proof. The smoking gun. It could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
The notion of a U.S. war on terrorism is simply a fraud. There is no war on terrorism. The Anglo-Americans are backing terrorists exactly when and where it suits them, from Chechnya to Cuba to other points around the world. This is a typical British strategy. You've got to know the name of Brigadier General Sir Frank Kitson. He was the British operations officer in Kenya at the time of the Mau Mau. And what Kitson saw, which has been known to commanders for centuries, millennia, if you've got an underground nationalist organization and you want to discredit them, you create your own parallel underground nationalist organization. You send them out. It's got to have the same name. It's got to have a false flag. You send them out, have it commit tremendous atrocities. Those will be blamed on the original relatively benign group, and they'll be discredited, they'll be demonized, and you gain political advantage. He wrote a book about it called Low Intensity Operations. And the technique is called the technique of the counter gang or the pseudo gang. Just as Al-Qaeda, in the broader sense, is a pseudo gang or counter gang created by US and British and Israeli intelligence. It's a counter gang against normal Arab nationalists or anybody with any positive agenda for reform or independence or development anywhere in the Arab world. They can always be labeled Al-Qaeda. The reductio ad absurdum of this is President Chavez of Venezuela, after giving Bush a hard time at various conferences and doing things to undermine the dollar, the neocons are now accusing President Chavez of being a member of Al-Qaeda. So you can see how easy it is to demonize somebody once you've got a good counter gang going. There's an oligarchical consensus in the United States, inspired by the neocons, inspired by Samuel Huntington and the rest of them, which is that without an enemy image, you cannot have an oligarchical society. Ultimately, that's the why, because if you look at this, you say, terrorism, endless war, why, who benefits? Those who benefit are the beneficiaries of the current system, financiers primarily. They feel that without the diversion of a war, they cannot maintain social relations, property relations in the current form. And this they are determined to do. So they have manufactured, in a complete hysteria, a largely fictitious external enemy. You remember 1984 by George Orwell. Julia at one point says, I don't even think there is a war. It's just a fake to keep people under control. Orwell, I think, had a very good understanding of some of these psychological mechanisms.
Julia, do you think the resistance is real?
No. None of it's real.
There are thought criminals who maintain that the resistance is not real. Believe me, Winston, it is very real. Perhaps you are not familiar with how it operates.
I'm attentive to the news.
Indeed. And perhaps you imagine a huge network of conspirators prepared to commit any atrocity to demoralize and weaken the order of our society. The reality is infinitely more subtle. If Goldstein himself fell into the hands of the thought police, he could not give them a list of his agents. Such a list does not exist. They are not an organization in the sense we know. Nothing holds it together but an idea.
The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. The essential act of modern warfare is the destruction of the produce of human labor. A hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects, and its object is not victory over Eurasia or Eastasia.
So, this is not a war on terrorism. We need to all be clear about this. It is a war against Muslims and Islam. Not only is it happening worldwide, but it's happening right here in America, that is claiming to be fighting this war for the sake of freedom, while it's infringing on the freedom of its own citizens.